Ah, there you are.
Hi
Hey there.
there.
How are you?
Hi, Sarah. Nice to join you live.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for bringing your incredible film to Hot Docs at Home so that we can watch for free. It's so fun to watch. It is so shocking. I mean, 60 paintings sold for $80 million. I mean, that is just wild. And not everyone who's watching right now may have seen the film yet. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the film and how you found this incredible story.
Well, I had made a documentary a while back called Blurred Lines that looked at the eccentricities and the vagaries of the art world, the contemporary art world. And I was just so amazed at the fact that you're really, unless you have a ticket, you're not getting in. It's a tough world. So, and I had a tough time making that film, and a lot of the people who talked to me for that film probably regretted it. But then a good friend of mine by the name of Jay Hennick told me about this story, and I read up about it in Vanity Fair and elsewhere, and I was so intrigued because it really was a catch me if you can. Had all the sort of central casting out of Hollywood, the prestigious art gallery in New York, the shadowy couple from Mexico and Spain that sold fake art, the intriguing and reclusive artist from Shanghai that made these perfect copies of some of the greatest painters that ever lived, and then the gallery owner, this unusual, eccentric yet brilliant, academic of the art world who believed that the art was real, and then the collectors who had to have it. And so it was a perfect storm where you were seeing the most incredible art, as you said, over 60 paintings sold for over $80 million to some of the most prestigious people in the world, including galleries and museums. So it was quite something. So the film, I had to make it because, again, it was like a catch me if you can story in the most entertaining way possible.
It's so funny what you said about many of the people you interview maybe regretting it. Because one of the things that makes the film so impressive is how you managed to interview so many key players who are involved in this fraud that happened quite recently. Can you tell us a little bit about how you managed to get so many key people into the film?
Well, it's interesting, Sarah. When I began the process, nobody really wanted to talk. The story was still fresh. Many had talked to other organizations like news outlets like 60 Minutes and 2020 and American Greed, and they were not happy with their comments because they were edited and they were short and they just really didn't get the story out. So I pretty much said to people, look, I'm making a feature-length documentary. You're going to have the full breadth of your story here, and yes, there'll be editing, but at the end of the day, you'll be able to get a sense of the story. And so they wanted to talk. I mean, I think the person that really sort of held out in the longest way in wanting to know whether or not she'd participate was Anne Friedman, who ran the Knoedler Gallery for over 30 years and had this, she was the doyenne of New York art for so long. But she had to trust me, I had to trust her, and I also knew that there really wasn't much of a film without her because she was the gatekeeper. She always said, I never bought the art, I took it on consignment, which isn't quite true. And then she would bring it to collectors all over the world. But her story was so intriguing because people would say, well, if you're a student of art and you've seen the most prestigious art come through your gallery, how did you not know this was fake? And you have to understand this happened over 10 years, 60 paintings coming through over 10 years. She wanted to believe they were real. And she also took the art to experts who wanted it to be real too. And they would say, gee, that Rothko, it looks real. Or sorry, I shouldn't say that. It looks beautiful, which she construed as real. And then when the art ended up being fake, they said, well, I never said that. So, as I've always said with this film, there's so much blame to go around, but you can't stop watching it because it's so unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask actually if there was anything about the psychology of the art world that you picked up on when you were making this film, because there's so many different forces at work, but Anne is a really interesting character in terms of that.
Well, I mean, psychology is a key word, and was one of the reasons why one of our characters in the film was this Maria Konnikova, who's not only a championship poker player, she became a championship poker player to write a book called, I think, Bluff, about what it is to be in poker, but or play poker. But she wrote this book, which was an entire chapter on this episode and on Anne Friedman, how she believes that Anne, and it's true, Anne Friedman get into this with similar to Jose Bergantinos, who does deceive, and Glafira Rosales, who are the Bonnie and Clyde of art. Anne gets into it because she feels she's made a discovery. And the psychologist, Maria, feels that once you become so vested in this and sunk in, that you become psychologically so locked in that you want to believe things are real and you double down. It's like
Right.
dating somebody and everybody's told you he or she is so bad for you, but you don't want to see it. So she just kept going on and on and on, believing she would dig in and find the art was real. Now, remember, the con artists, were very good. They kept changing the story. They'd find little letters and pieces and whatnot to keep Anne hooked. Should she have known 5 or 6 paintings in that the paintings were coming from unusual provenance, as it's called in the art world? Maybe, but art is discovered in people's basements and attics all the time, but this was a lot of art.
I was amazed to see how well Anne Friedman kept her cool during these interviews, these extensive interviews, which I'm sure you were putting some pressure on her. And I like to think of myself as someone who can read people reasonably well. And for anyone in the audience, if you see this film, she's impossible to read.
Yeah.
In my mind, it could mean that she's either totally innocent, she really is innocent, or it can mean she's a good liar. Did you have any opinion on her innocence or guilt going into the film, or did that change?
I did a screening at the Hamptons Film Festival a couple of weeks ago, and Alec Baldwin interviewed me for the film, and he asked me the same question. So you're in good company. I mean, Anne is, I don't think it's a question of a great liar or a good liar. She's a born salesperson. In fact, anytime I've ever visited her art gallery, which is a lot, she would always try to sell me a painting, sell me a piece of art. It's just how she operates. So, yes, she's one cool cat. There's no question in her composure. That's just Anne. She's not emotional. There's many times I've tried to push her, and in that there's a moment in the film where, again, she wants to believe the art is real, and then Glafira Rosales, who's now sitting in jail, confesses because she's looking at many years in prison for tax evasion and wire fraud and money laundering and whatnot, all the things that the district attorney in New York was interested in. They didn't care about fake art. They cared about how she misstated her tax returns and lied. And I said to Anne, this must have been the worst day in the world for you, because that's the day where she says everything's fake. So no matter what probable story existed, an excuse anybody can have, it's now over. And Anne said, she just sort of looks at the camera and she goes, yeah, bad day. And that's just her. I mean, I think Anne's one of those people that if she ever stopped for a minute to think about how bad it was. I mean, she almost went to jail. She lost her reputation. I mean, I've been in New York in restaurants with her where I've seen other people look the other way, walk away. I mean, there's, the Desoles who were burnt on a Rothko collectors. And this is a major guy, Domenico Desole, who runs Tom Ford International, former chair of Christie's, says, she says, the wife, Eleanor Desole, when I see her on the Upper East Side on Madison Avenue, I cross the street. So, I mean, Anne paid a heavy price for this. She made a lot of money, but she paid a heavy price for this in terms of reputation. So does one believe she got into it to deceive people intentionally? No, but she got caught up in one bad situation.
And what about her boss, who would have owned the gallery? He's an interesting character as well.
Well, brilliant question. No one in dozens of interviews and screenings, no one's asked about him yet. So Michael Hammer, who's a descendant of Armand Hammer, the great industrialist and great art collector who brought art from the Hermitage from St. Petersburg decades ago, and one of the great collectors. This is his father, and Michael Hammer is also the father of Armie Hammer, the actor, the Hollywood actor. And Michael Hammer is a high flyer. You know, he's living the life. He's living in California, heir to one of the great fortunes ever. And the question was, what was Michael Hammer's role? He did not get involved in the day-to-day running of the gallery. That was Anne's responsibility. Anne Friedman will tell you that she had no idea about anything about the finances of running the gallery. She never went to the accounting floor, that she called it. Hard to believe. I mean, she wasn't really interested in money on that end of it. In fact, which is true, that all of the money that she made over the decade of selling this art, over $1 million in commissions, she never spent. So I don't know what that says. Does that say that she just was not a spender, which she's not? Does it say that she knew she'd be caught one day? Probably not. I don't know. But Michael Hammer, on the other end of it, as the gallery was making tens of millions of dollars in commission, was spending like crazy. You know, the money was funneling out of the gallery, and it's been proven in court. He's buying Maybachs. He's traveling the world. And he's quite a character when he walks into court with long blonde hair, tanned in the winter, velvet suits, and quite something. So, he's LA top to bottom on that end of it. But I just think he looked at it and went, wow. Keep in mind that the gallery, not to I'll lose 92 people here, but, the New York art gallery world had exploded. The big galleries like Gagosian and Hauser and Wirth and others, White Cube. And Knoedler was starting to sink. They didn't have all of the abstract expressions of art and the new Hearst and Koons and the new artists. And so this suddenly put Knoedler back on top. And Hammer loved that. It's interesting that the minute the scandal hit, he closed the gallery and sold the Upper East Side Gallery townhouse, now owned by financier mogul Leon Black, who bought it for millions and millions, and is building the most expensive private townhouse ever in New York. But Hammer got out quick.
There's definitely some interesting characters in this film. I mean, it's one of the best parts of the film. I wanted to ask, if these paintings were being sold by Anne Friedman for 15 years or more, 10, 15 years, and she's only one seller, how common do you think art fraud really is? Do you think that it's possible that if we're walking into MoMA or the Louvre or even here in Toronto, the AGO, that we could be looking at fakes?
Well, without a doubt, it's been proven, and somebody was once asked how are there fakes, or what percentage of the art at MoMA or the Louvre or say is fake, and it's a big number because you don't know when you're passing things on auctions, estates, inheritance. People are selling stuff, they're buying stuff. The forgeries out there are spectacular. There's legends and legends and great stories out there about fake art. There's one great story about a man who came over from Persia at the time and was going to Christie's and Sotheby's and buying real Picassos, and then he'd take the paperwork from the real Picassos and have fakes made, and then take the fakes and the paperwork and sold 100 of these in Japan.
No way.
Japanese business people were buying them, but that's one of 50 stories. So there's fakes everywhere. Most museums are afraid to bring the art up from the vaults and look at it because some stuff's fake. There's stuff on the walls that people don't want to look too deeply into. There's no question.
Well, it brings up so many interesting philosophical questions about art as well. So many of these fakes were extremely beautiful. So if they aren't valuable as a beautiful thing, what is it exactly that makes these fakes worth nothing in comparison to an original that is almost identical? why does the origin of a painting mean so much if they look the same?
Well, no, a fake painting, a copy or a fake, and there's a difference, on a real painting, they're all worthless at the end of the day in terms of the paint and the canvas and the frame. It's only worth the materials that went into it, which, depending on the frame, could be a couple $1,000s, could be a lot less on that end of it. It's worth what the actual art world has suggested it's worth and what it trades for. I mean, that's the great hypocrisy out of all of this. It's an unregulated world. You walk into an art gallery and somebody says that piece is worth $10,000 and you go, okay. Why? Because either the gallery's trying to create a market for the artist, and they've even gone further and they've sold art at an auction house like Christie's or Sotheby's or Phillips. They've had bidders go in to drive the numbers up, nothing illegal, and suddenly the number is worth. But what's interesting with the art world is that if a gallery doesn't feel that you're delivering the numbers, then they'll dump you, and then your stuff, the art's worth nothing. I've always said to collectors, buy because you love it. Mm-hmm. Buy with your eyes, not your ears. And the world we're living in right now is that, very wealthy people are relying on art consultants, which are important because they will steer you towards important art to collect. But you should never buy it because somebody said it's great. Buy it because you love coming home and seeing it on your wall. It's subjective as it always is, but it's really become quite brutal out there on that end of it because there's no sense to what anything's worth anymore.
Yeah, it's very interesting, the meaning that we can assign to certain things, whether it be fashion or in art or whatever it might be. I think obviously neither of us wants to be conning people out of millions of dollars with fake paintings, but do you think that we can think of faking art as an art form in its own?
Well, it's a great question. There have been exhibits of the Knoedler fakes. There's been other exhibits in galleries that just have some of the great forgeries of all time. Of course, it's pop art. I mean, when Andy Warhol painted a soup can, people said in a Brillo box, people went, what? I mean, and then you move on to Jeff Koons doing a stuffed shark, or Damien Hirst making foil butterflies. I mean, if you love it, you love it. On that end of it, you buy it. But yes, I think there's fake art, as there's been several documentaries now and exhibits, is its own form of art form. There's no question. This interview might be fake. In fact, I was too busy to do this live Instagram on this beautiful LG phone that it's a hologram. It's not even me here.
Yep. We have amazing technology here at Hot Docs. It's very smooth. I've rehearsed my part, so everything is smooth as butter. Just back on that note, I found myself so impressed with the artist who was responsible for all the fake paintings. I was kind of rooting for him because at the end of the day, he is such an incredible artist.
Well, Pei Shin-Quinn, very interesting. Comes from Shanghai. He cannot find any appreciation for his style of art, the Chinese art, which was fairly landscape oriented, but he's trained to be so technically brilliant that he could do anything. But nobody's buying his art in New York. Nobody cares. He's doing caricatures in Times Square. He's painting houses. He's giving people lessons in math, tutoring wealthy kids. He's tutoring in math, and really angry about it, and joins the Artists League, where one of his classmates is Ai Weiwei, who I met at a Hot Docs event last year, who knew Pei Shin, and he said, we got to root for him. He was starving. So here you have a shadowy couple, the Bonnie and Clyde of art, as I called them, Glafira Rosales and Jose Bergantino Diaz, who go to him, find him, track him, and say, can you do a Rothko? And he goes, of course I can do a Rothko. And he does a Rothko, and then they take it, they sign the back, they age it a little bit, they pour some tea on it, they stain it, and then they bring it in to test the waters with Anne Friedman. Anne Friedman goes, my God, I've never seen that. Where did it come from? I'll take that for $500,000, of which they give Pei Shin a couple of thousand. And then this becomes the scam. One piece after another. And Pei Shin, can you do A Pollock, Jackson Pollock? Sure, I can do a Jackson Pollock. De Kooning? Sure. Sure, Motherwell? Anything you want. And he does catch on about how he's being used. We went to his apartment and his studio in Shanghai for this film. And, you know, he took off when Rome started burning, for the lack of a better phrase, and realizes that he's in trouble, and he scurries off to Shanghai, as does Carlos Bergantinos. He takes off and goes to Lugo, Spain, which you can't even find, and leaves the mother of his child and his partner Glafira to sort of stay in New York and take the heat.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, that's such an amazing story. Somehow I knew Ai Weiwei would approve. And someone in the comments had asked if anyone was buying Peng's art, which is interesting. I kind of want his art myself. I mean, that's such an amazing backstory.
I think, you know, it's funny when I was trying to find him, because, you know, you cannot, first of all, I don't speak the language, and I was using all kinds of fixers and helpers in China to find him, and then I would find a gallery that represented him. He now claims he's only painting for himself, but all of the galleries, as soon as they had somebody, a Westerner approach, you know, basically cut me off immediately on that end of it. And even tracking him down in Shanghai was an adventure, as you can see in the film. But he is, I saw a lot of the art in his apartment. I mean, he is a beautiful painter. And what's interesting is that when artists like that in China were being taught to paint, it was so rigid and technical that when they saw art of Pollock or Rothko, it was so liberating for them to have a brush stroke that wasn't that typical sort of Asian landscaping of trees and rivers and people, much like the lifestyle under a sort of a communist regime. It was just liberating for them. And they had hoped that, you know, they would find that audience in New York. And some did. Many did.
So I have to ask, I mean, has Anne Friedman, the seller, seen the film yet?
You know, it's interesting. The film, it's been at film festivals in the U.S., and because of the world we're living in right now, I mean, she kept wanting to see the film, and I said to her, Anne, I know her. She's an academic, and I said, there's so much in it you're not going to like, but it's the only opportunity you're going to get to tell your whole side of the story. And so I really want to watch it with you. And so, you know, it's going to premiere at the Hot Docs Film Festival, and you'll come to Toronto and you'll watch it. Well, then the world shut down. And then it was in Nantucket and the Hamptons Film Festival, I think. And finally, people were sending her snippets, and she was reading the press and getting very annoyed. The New York Times did a story and other people, and she was getting very nervous about it and kept asking me to see it. And I really said, look, it's a film I want to watch with you. But she just, I think, finally got tired of me and then went to somebody's house, because she's not technically proficient, and watched it on, you know, at I think I'm going to say the Nantucket Film Festival or Hamptons Film Festival, and watched it online, and then sent me an email. It was kind of bizarre. We have not had a big conversation about it. We will, because I do like her, and she does, you know, she did trust me to make the film. She said no to 60 Minutes. I don't feel that I've by any means have exploited her at all or anything like that. This is her story, and it is what it is on that end of it. But I think her only comment to me was that she felt there was a lot of editing. Well, you know, I think if in Anne's perfect world, it would have been, I think I filmed her for nearly 20 hours. It would have been a 20-hour film with just her talking, with nobody else saying anything negative. So she didn't like, I know she wouldn't have liked people that would have had issues with her, people that she would say lied, people that, you know, that she had a comment for at that end of it. But I figured it was the most balanced story she was ever going to get.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and she does come across as likable, actually, and she also made her case very well. Like I said earlier, I mean, I'm still ambivalent about whether or not, she knew or not.
It's a great comment. I mean, every time we finish filming with her, my um, camera people would say to me, my crew would say, it changed, guilty. The next time we'd film her, not guilty. I mean, Alec Baldwin said, she sat there like a little schoolgirl that had been harmed and done wrong, and he didn't necessarily buy it, but he was amazed that Glafira Rosales, who was not a big personality, was able to take her down. And what you have to remember is that Glafira Rosales knew exactly what to feed her. She would buy art from the Knoedler Gallery. She would show up at the right art events in New York. And I have to tell you again, you can't get into these. I went to Basel, the famous Basel Art Fair in Switzerland, to film, and the people that run the galleries at the art fair won't talk to you unless they know who you are as a collector, because selling art to a famous collector, an industrialist, a Steve Cohen or somebody famous, is big. I just sold that painting to whomever. Selling a painting to Barry Avrich in Switzerland is not worth a cup of hot chocolate. So it doesn't work. In fact, I fell in love with one piece in one of the galleries of a New York firm that was showing in Switzerland, and the person running the gallery wouldn't even look at me. And so I went around the booth, I Googled everything there was to know about the artist. I went back in and started making ridiculously lofty comments about, oh, well, that's that piece when the artist was studying Stravinsky at in Stade, and they were like, yes. But that's how crazy the world is. It's not. There's no value in selling art to somebody who isn't going to have an impressive collection.
It's another layer of prestige. It's not just if you can afford the piece. It's also, if they're willing to sell it to you, which is really interesting.
Well, exactly. That's why Sarah, if you walk into most prominent art galleries, there's no prices listed, none, and they might give you a sheet of paper to walk around with if you're Inspector Clouseau, and you can figure out what's what. But then when there's somebody sitting at a desk, and then you go up to them and say, hey, I have a question about, that piece, and they'll go, and they'll go to the back to get somebody who comes out who's pretty annoyed to even want to talk to you because they don't recognize you. Chances are you're not going to spend the money, on what the piece is, and now you've wasted their time while they're sitting in the back playing solitaire or trying to get somebody else to buy some art. I'm not being cynical. It's just like it's just always. There's a gallery I love going to in London and in New York, and it's just to get anybody to talk to you. It's like I've walked in, with a COVID, flu long before it even exists. They don't even want to look at you. So it's a tricky world.
I'm sure they get a lot of window shoppers too, huh?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, so we're running out of time. I just wanted to ask. If there's one piece of advice that we could take away, or someone could take away from a story like this, what do you think that would be?
Well, as I said earlier, buy it because you love it. If it's expensive, then you want to at least make sure that you completely understood where it came from and that you're getting paperwork that it came from such and such an auction, or it belonged to a collector or a bank or whoever is selling it. You want to understand, it's called provenance. You want to understand where it's coming from and that there's some paperwork that certifies it. Even these collectors in this story were getting some very good deals. So that might have been suspicious. If you're able to get a Rothko and a de Kooning for millions of dollars less than what it's worth, yeah, people do want to sell. It's desperate times. There are deals to be had. But even that begs the question of where did it come from? But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, you come home after a miserable day, after a great day, you walk in and see a piece of art, in your apartment, in your house, wherever, and it's there because it makes you feel good, not because somebody thinks it's important that you should own it, or that you might be able to flip it in 5 years for double or triple. If you do, good. But, art should be for loving, not flipping.
Absolutely. I love that lesson. So we're reaching the end of our time, but the time has come now for anyone who's watching. We're going to be giving away an LG Velvet 5G phone. So the first person who
Wow.
can answer the first person who can answer the following trivia question in the comments below will win. And Barry, you probably have an unfair advantage, right? So you can't answer.
I won't answer, but I will tell you I'm doing this on an LG Velvet 5G. You didn't tell me to say it. I'm just looking at it. And I'm the camera and the screen is crystal clear. It's beautiful.
I know, my end too. It's a really cool phone. Okay, so here is the trivia question. If you're ready, which art movement did Mark Rothko, Jackson Pollock, and Willem de Kooning all belong to?
Here it comes. Here comes the
Here
answer.
it comes. Here it comes. Usually it's the person who's fastest at Googling, or maybe we have some art historians in the audience.
Whoa,
Um,
it's slow.
it is slow. Everyone's taking their
Well,
time.
I will say without well, maybe one clue without saying it. I know that the
Ah, we got we'll we got it.
that's
That's pretty much it, right?
that's pretty much. I think that first person. I mean the movement at shortened version was Abex.
Well, congratulations, little row. You're the proud new owner of an LG Velvet phone, and we will contact you from the Hot Docs account within the next 24 hours. But that's the end of our time tonight. So if you're looking for a fascinating, absolutely jaw-dropping documentary to watch, definitely check out Made You Look, a true story about fake art. It's viewable for free on the Hot Docs at Home website. And the final Q&A for this series will be tomorrow night at 6 p.m. talking about the gospel according to Andre right here on the Hot Docs Instagram. But until then, thank you so much, Barry, for giving your time